Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our Friday highlight. Today we're going to be featuring the Tier 9 Japanese Battlecruiser, the Adatara, or also presented as a battleship here in the game. So, I'm going to talk a little bit more about history on the ship, and then get into talking more about the ship playstyle, what makes Adatara different, and what is the new unique gimmick that Wargaming has added to this ship. So I was looking at the WoW's wiki, and it shares that the following announcement of an ambitious shipbuilding program by the US in 1919, Japan reconsidered the plans for the development of its navy and gave the order to build 4 more battleships and 4 more battlecruisers. 13 variants of battleships and battlecruisers were presented. Project A was selected to become the Key class battleship, and Project K was used for the battlecruiser. Construction was meant to start in 1922, but the battlecruisers were never laid down in the aftermath of the Washington Naval Conference. And so this Adatara first became released in early access in almost mid-October 2023 as of update 12.9. But here she is in the game. And one of the things that's kind of interesting when they first introduced this new ship line, which starts at Tier 8 with how do you pronounce it? I'm spacing right now. The Yumahari is that the Yumahari has 4 10mm guns, where the Adatara and Bungo, if I pronounce that one right, are with 457mm guns. Now, realistically, these ships should have 460 millimeter main battery guns, but I think in an effort not to draw maybe even quote-unquote more overmatch into the game, Wargaming decided to go with 450s versus 460s just because of that overmatch capability, which honestly is kind of interesting. So if I do the math, hopefully I'm doing it right. When you have 460s, you can pin 32mm, where 457s cannot pin 32mm, right? It's just underneath. So I'm doing the math here. Yeah, so you technically pin 31.9 millimeter of armor. So I think Wargaming, maybe they didn't want to add more 460s into the game that would have, you know, that really large overmatch capability of 32mm armor, which should mean is most ships in the game, you know, your high tier ships, cruisers, even heavy cruisers, even battleships have that 32mm armor scheme. So they slapped on the 457s. Historically accurate, not so much, at least in my understanding and what research I've done in understanding this battleship or battlecruiser line. One of the things that was stood out to me here on Northern Waters in this game is how resilient the new Strashimi is with its heal. This dude's going to come back from the dead and how much health he's able to recover. And so I truly underestimate how much hit points you can heal back with that ship as we run into him here. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the ship, but there's going to be some action happening here. So there'll be a brief moment where I guess the battle per se will die down. As I'm going to go over here further to the left of the island on the one line as I get some shots here on the Genizer now. Aim too low. We didn't pick our shot up or shells up high enough there as we see this Aegir moving up. And I'm not really sure if he's yellowing. So we don't want to deal with his torpedoes as he's got 4x2. So he's got a rack of 4 on either side. So because he's giving us this nice broadside, because he's trying to bow in towards the torpedo dive bomber planes, which is exactly what he should be doing, he gives us a nice broadside opportunity. Now you notice, not only did we did 26,000 damage in that salvo, we just had our spotter destroyed. So this is the new gimmick that Wargaming has introduced on this line. It is known as the high precision spotter. Rather than just a normal spotter plane, it extends the main battery firing range, and it also increases the accuracy. So rather than having a plus 20% main battery firing range, you only get plus 10% main battery firing range. But you get a, I think it actually doesn't show here in Shipbuilder, but it should be like a 10% bonus reduction in terms of your overall accuracy, meaning you can tighter shell groupings as we finish. Well, almost finished off the Aegir there, but I think the Bismarck chimed in and helped me polish them off. So very quickly, you can see we're up to 81,000 damage and over 500,000 potential damage. But the high precision spotter plane is really kind of what sets this ship apart, of course, with this new skill. Right, it reminds you a little bit of Deadeye, right? Deadeye being a skill they had back in 10.0 with the commander rework, whereas if you fired, if you were playing a battleship and you fired but undetected, you had like, what was it, like a negative 20% reduction in your dispersion, so then you had GKs on J lines, so on and so forth. So, right now, we've won the flank here, of course, on the 1-3 line. Now, unfortunately, the other two battleships have took off, they're running away, and we haven't seen the new Strashimi, I think, for a little bit at this point, as he's basically healing up and probably just stealth torpedo firing. So we feel a bit useless, and we're going to be, to a certain extent, there's not going to be a lot of action happening for the next several minutes, perhaps. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the specifics and characteristics of this ship. Now, straight up, I will tell you, normally when I talk about the playstyle of battleships, I'm talking about, is it a brawler, is it a mid-range battleship, or is it a sniping battleship? Normally, I would say that most battleships can play mid-range to long-range, and with Adatara, she's a little bit of an interesting case because of she's a Battlecruiser, and we're talking about armor scheme, and you can see even with the hull upgrade, right, we're only sitting at 71,100 hit points. Now, hull A survivability is 65,400 hit points, and once you get the hull B upgrade, you will move up to 71,100 hit points. So she isn't a battleship that can take punishment as well as Izumo, as an example, or even Yamato, as an example, right? Both the ships have greater hit point pools, and they have better armor schemes, right? And they get the, Azuma doesn't get the 460s, but Yamato does, as long as I'm remembering that correctly. I hope I am. So you don't have that same armor scheme that helps you maybe be a bit more resilient. You may have tanked a lot of potential damage in a Izumo, in a Yamato, but in an Adatara, not so much. I think this game, perhaps, I get a lot of potential damage, mainly due with torpedoes and avoiding them, as there's going to be more torpedoes as this game progresses. But in terms of the play style, I feel that Adatara only does well in medium range when there's not many enemy ships around. Otherwise, as the game begins, you really want to play more farther range, and I'm talking like 16 kilometers and back, especially at tier 9. When you're seeing tier 10s, you're seeing super ships, you're seeing super CVs, this, that, and the other. Okay, so Adatara is a ship I would say you can go into medium range, and when I talk about medium range in the game at high tier, I'm usually referring to, let's say, 12 to 15 kilometers. That's kind of what I think of mid-range in the game. Now, Adatara has the ability in utilizing her concealment, right? So before you've built into anything with concealment, you're 15.01. Let's say you take concealment in the 5th slot, you're going to drop down to 13.51. And then you take concealment on your commander, then you're going to drop down to 12.16, or kind of basically represented as 12.2 here in the game. The other upgrade module you have on the ship is the main battery range, which starts off with 21.75 kilometers. Once you take the upgrade gunfire control system, you'll be up to 23.9 kilometer range, right? So you've got, as you can see, we have plenty of range. Now, right now we're using, of course, that high precision spotter. You have 5 of them, and you really want to be able to utilize them. Like, I'll often in games, or I find myself in games, I still have 2, and I'm like, man, I really need to like work on utilizing and taking advantage of these high precision spotter planes than I normally would. Okay, as we're having some issues here with Bismarck. Maybe I got in his way. I don't remember. I think he reversed out, and then he accelerated forward after I had moved up, so I don't get to use my rear turrets. with the high precision spotter plane as it goes down, right? So that can be a little bit frustrating, so you do need to be mindful. You can get 3 hull salvos. I take the main battery mod 3 in the 6 slot, so I'm getting faster reload because I don't really feel like I need more range in the ship that gives me a lot of range already. You can see on the minimap 23.9. Now let me kind of just phrase the question. Do I think Adatara is a good tier 9 battleship in the game? I think she is. It's just that, again, she's really not a battleship. She's a battle cruiser. She has less hit points. She has less armor scheme. Maybe it reminds you a little bit more of the newer German battlecruiser line with, you know, the Prinz Ruprecht, the Schlieffen, right? Those are ships that you can't necessarily take prolonged engagements in. Maybe you need to take cover behind an island, you need to go dark and then re-engage, but both lines have pretty decent concealment, right? I think you have like 12.6 conceal, I think, with Schlieffen if you go max conceal. Where here you're seeing 12.2. So even better than Schlieffen in that regard. So really, you're looking to find... You're really playing... This ship is meant to be played around the main battery guns, right? You're looking for opportunities. You're looking for broadsides as much as you possibly can. And punishing. I mean, having the 457s helps you out a lot with cruisers. Whether you drop some shells down in the deck of a cruiser and you citadel them right, even some heavy cruisers, light cruisers in the game, really convenient there. But sometimes I'm a little frustrated by the guns. I don't know if I can tell you why. I think sometimes with these 457s, I'm desiring for these AP shells to do more damage. The AP shells, as of now, is, if I don't take the, super heavy AP shells, they do 13,500. If I were to take super heavy AP shells, then we're going to start doing 14,512. So this ship is pretty, I would say it's pretty one-dimensional. I mean, it's pretty much long range at the start, and then maybe as the battle progresses, you're playing more mid-range, right? Long range being like, let's say 16 kilometers and out. Otherwise, you're going to see an example here. If you don't play wisely, or an enemy battleship like this, or was it Scarlet Thunder, is going to have some AP loaded for us, and you're just going to see how much damage that does to us. I was playing a game actually last night, and I was only detected taking fire for about let's say about a minute from a Cleveland and 2 battleships, and like my health will just like vanish. Now here I'm hoping that he just has explosive loaded. I'm like, I really hope this guy doesn't have AP loaded as I'm going broadside out to him, right? And surprise, he has AP loaded, so he's playing that really well, because I was thinking that this guy has torpedoes and I don't want to get any closer to him, and I really need to be able to open up distance to avoid taking torpedoes. I don't know if that's factually correct off the top of my head. I was just thinking that this ship definitely does have torpedoes. So, I mean, even when you look at the consumable aspect of the ship, right? I mean, you have your repair party, you have your damage control party, you have the gimmick of the high precision spotter, which is really rewarding when you are able to utilize that on broadside targets. It's very satisfying. So I think if you're... this ship has better accuracy than Izumo. Okay? It just feels better. The Sigma... let me tell you the Sigma. I think I remember what it is. It's 2.1. Your horizontal and vertical dispersion is slightly better than the Bungo, but the Bungo has a 2.2 Sigma. I'm going to check that now just to make sure I remember correctly. Yeah, looks like that is a correct statement that I have indeed made. Now with the build, I've pretty much gone for a pretty standard build thus far, you know, and I can show you guys tomorrow when I do the Saturday upgrading commander build video. But this ship doesn't really, I would say, necessarily excel at one thing. In certain instances, she reminds me of, like, for example, North Carolina, or maybe even Iowa to an extent. You know, these are just both, these, like, to me, like, a good ship in the game is, how does a battleship in the game is how do her guns perform? Where Adatara's guns perform relatively well, as we take a blind shot and fishing out the new Shishimi here. With our depth charge planes, right? And we briefly spotted there, as he had more health earlier, actually, so he'd healed back, I think, to like 9k. So I don't know how much he can heal back at this point, if he can heal anything back more at this point. But this ship is pretty much the straightforward. You want to make sure you're angling well. Take opportunities of firing upon broadside targets or upon ships where your 457 is going to overmatch the 27 millimeter armor in the game, right? But you're not going to overmatch 32 millimeter like the Yamato can with her 460s, since again you only get 457s here. Yeah. Now, do I think this ship has really great damage potential? I mean, yeah, if you get lucky with your matches, but for myself in the battles I've played, I've not had, how do I phrase this? I've not had crazy damage games. I think this is one of the best damage games I think I technically have at the Adatara, as we have this Kagero player. He's playing really well, so we're actually getting squeezed in by 2 destroyers at the moment. Yeah, it's not a battleship that I do exceedingly tons amount of damage. Now here we utilize that high precision spotter, right? So a classic example of that. The Soyuz decides to go broadside. We punish ships that go broadside. I guess that's probably a good way you can summarize the ship. You punish broadsides, right? If you're playing something like, let's say, the Massachusetts, it's not a main battery driven ship, because it's like a shotgun shooting beyond 12 kilometers, right? And so you have a broadside ship and you get disappointed because you don't get to Citadel. Your salvo just kind of goes everywhere. Well, you don't have that disappointment with Adatara or like in Iowa, as an example. I get frustrated with Izumo because she has a lot of a very tall vertical dispersion, and I just feel like her guns never go, her shells land where I don't want them to land, right? Or lands where I don't want them to land, however I phrase that. So if you're looking for a tier 9 battleship in the game that has reliable, consistent main battery guns, then you have the Adatara, as we take another blind shot and fishing for this Nushishimi. So he's never turned his AA off. Maybe he had it briefly off there where my high precision spotter was spotting him, and then he's like, I'm going to turn it back on. But he's constantly feeding us information of where he is, which is really convenient for us. So at this point, we're winning the game. All we need to do is hold the cap, and I don't want him to come in and back cap us, so I'm actually just going to sit here as a deterrent, as he's probably got a lot of frustrated because he hasn't, as far as I remember, he's not landed any torpedoes on us. What I will say in terms of the depth charges, the ASW strike, you do get a 10-kilometer range, which is nice. So that is really convenient and nice, not having like a 5 or 6. So it's nice when they have more of these ships that play around more the main battery, not like a secondary or brawler, that they don't also like nerf the ASW strike range. So I am at least very appreciative of that. So the best way to play this ship is taking your time in the beginning of the battle, playing at range, playing beyond that 16-kilometer range as we lose our champagne. He really booked it across the map with his engine boost, by the way. I think he gets an engine boost. But starting off the battle, you want to take it easy. You don't really want to push an aggro. You want to try to be angled in or angled out. Angled out tends to be a bit better, so if they do push, you can easily disengage. Like where that Scarlet Thunder pushes in, I was facing in, then I had to turn out, and I ate a massive AP salvo from him. As at this point, I'm just tracking where Nushishimi is. I was worried that he might try to run up and torpedo rush me, right? But then, because he's kept his AA on, I'm just tracking where he is, and I'm just going to relay information to my teammates constantly where he's at as the points continue to tick in our favor. So that's basically where you're going to see me on the screen at this point, and that's basically how the battle's going to end once we hit the 1,000 points. But yeah, so if you're looking, again, for a tier 9 battleship with the main battery guns that behave in terms of their accuracy, Adatara is really good. You know, I can make the same case maybe even for Iowa's 9 406 guns. Sometimes I'm like, I just wish, I don't know what it is. Like, I feel like sometimes these guns should pin more than what I think they do, or I'm disappointed that I get bounces. But I think that's probably just me, and maybe the enemy ship I'm firing at angles right at the right moment, or I just aimed poorly, like on that Genaizen earlier where we just like hit his main battery belt or main armor belt as he's turning away. And what else to really say? I don't really think there's much else to say as this battle is going to wind up. I guess I've talked a little bit more about the ship than necessarily the actual battle itself, as it's pretty straightforward. We didn't have a lot of action except for 2 parts, beginning and then midway through there is that we got some shots and finished off some enemy ships. So we're going to go to post-battle results and break that down. So we did 169,000 damage. Again, this isn't a battleship that I think you should expect to do massive amounts of damage in. Possible if you get a lot of broadsides fed to you by the enemy team. So this is a battleship that punishes broadside. And I think that's one of the reasons why in general I just like the Adatara. 3 kills, 3 citadels, like that Soyuz who went broadside to us. I think we got a citadel on that A-gear earlier as well. We're going to play second on our team. Our Kolsik did an amazing job. Hats off to him. Adatara was busy covering some distance on the map with 2017 base XP. That Baltimore did really well, as well as the Kagero. I think that's actually how you pronounce that ship. So you see we almost took 2 potential damage, but that's just partially just avoiding torpedoes, I think, whereas a lot of that came in. And you see 13,500 damage on that new Sashimi. And you know, and a lot of the other damage that he took. So he took a lot of damage. So he probably got like a dreadnought or something. I didn't actually even look. And with premium count, that's how we end all said and done. Now I have the bun going now. I just bought her on what is today, because I'm recording this video in advance. I bought it Tuesday night. So hopefully, you know, maybe next week I do the video on the bundle. I have a lot of ships I need to do upgrade commander build videos on. But tomorrow we'll do upgrade commander build video on the Adatara. Not anything necessarily crazy, I would say, in terms of our typical build options, because really you're just building the ship for the main battery guns, and you're building for accuracy, and you're just building into this, trying to help that survivability that's lacking. So I think, you know, they gave you a ship that has relatively accurate main battery guns in the form of the 457s, but and a gimmick high precision spotter consumable button that works for just a minute. You can actually get about 3 salvos if you time it well with the reload in the 6th slot on the upgrades. But I mean, you have good conceal, but your health pool is lacking, your armor scheme is lacking. So yeah, that's basically straightforward. I like playing this more than the Izumo. With the Imahari, I like playing the Amagi over the Imahari. But I think the Adatara beats out the Izumo in my opinion, but of course that varies when you start talking about hit points and armor scheme, and Izumo having, you know, all of her main battery guns up front, so you're pretty much mostly sitting Bowen for the most part. But I think Adatara is a bit more of a fun battleship in my opinion to play here in World of Warships. So if you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I would appreciate it, as we are doing really well. There's a lot of you who've we've had more subscribers lately, and so I'm very appreciative of that if you just recently subscribed to the channel. So until next time, take care.